What's up, everybody? Drew Brucker, Rory Flynn, Midjourney Fast Hours, episode 2. How we
We're
doing?
back.
How we
We're
feeling?
back. We're good. We're good, man. I think Drew and I were just laughing because we messed up the intro. And there's something that whenever I'm recording videos, I swear to God, man, I will do the first 10 seconds like 70 times because I screw it up so much. We can't even get into what I want to talk about. I screw it up all the time. I have like a B-roll of all the screw ups, and it's just me talking to myself like, you're such an idiot. Oh, you suck. It's
Yeah, for
it's so
me,
hard.
it's just these big lips get in the way sometimes, bro. So, I mean, it just happens. But I feel you on that. I feel you, and man, it feels good to be back here. I mean, we had a lot of fun recording episode 1. We had no idea what the hell we were doing, as we told you guys, and I think one of the things that we've talked about is just the format of this and kind of straddling this nice little line of delivering it in a valuable way, making it community driven, making it something easy to listen to no matter what you're doing, right? Whether you're driving, doing something around the house, etc. And so we're trying to straddle this line between that and making sure we deliver that, but also not over engineering this thing, right? Because we don't need to do that. This is really just about us, two friends, two nerds with Midjourney, just kind of talking through that. And I like it better that way. I don't know about you.
I do. I mean, I'm not. I'm an agent of chaos. I thrive in it. I don't like anything structured. It's probably why Midjourney fits so well with my personality. It's just pure, unadulterated like creativity and freedom. So yes, I'm down with it. And again, as Drew said, we don't know what we're doing, so we're just gonna test some stuff, see what works. You guys tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. This thing's gonna sound different in 6 months than it does right now. So we'll rip on it. But that being said, man, there's always it feels like in this AI world slash landscape, whatever the hell you want to call it, it's like 1 week explosion. 50 things happen. Everyone gets all like crazy. And then the next week it's like, mellow waters, which feels like it was like a mellow waters week this week in comparison to the
Yeah.
last few. But, we're waiting here for Midjourney probably to drop some, news on when 6.5 is going to come out. That's going to be probably fairly soon. It's always, you read the office hours, you listen to the office hours. Oh, it's a couple weeks away. Okay, cool. Like, they will never give us any heads up either. It'll just happen one day. And, we always joke it's like Friday at 11:37 p.m. when no one can go and try it unless you're in Europe or Asia, especially us over here
Yeah.
on the East Coast of the U.S. But yeah, man, that being said, there was some interesting updates, or at least a couple things we can talk about from the office hours this week. So we're going to run through a few of those, provide some potential color commentary on it, see where the hell everything goes, and then we'll rock and roll from there.
I like it. Yeah, let's run through
Yeah.
this. So, kind of on the immediate horizon, let's start there, right? Last episode we were talking about something that David said about how do we bring this magic over from Discord over to the website. And one of the first updates coming here is that they're going to start synchronizing the Discord rooms with the website rooms. So that's interesting. We've got personalization that they're working on, sort of like a V2, I guess we could call it, right? So just including a better version of what that is. Like you mentioned, Rory, V6.5, training it, planning to release it in the coming weeks. Could it be the end of the month? Possibly. We don't know. But what we do know for sure is that it'll come when we're both doing something and we're very busy.
100%.
So that you could totally
Absolutely.
trust. Now, what comes with 6.5, right? So apparently that's going to include improved image clarity and details like hands and skin textures. It's supposed to be a fairly big improvement overall. I think that's why they're leaning towards a 6.5 versus like a 6.1, for example. So pretty excited about that. And then lastly, this idea about style exploration and there being a tool for that. So that's something that they're in progress and working on. They're running a little bit behind on that, but that could potentially launch, sooner than expected too, if they sort of launch a more MVP style version of that. So those are the things that are immediately coming up. Based on that group, anything you want to talk about specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting, a few of them, right? Like, I think the one thing that I've always noticed, right? Like, especially with something like the personalization now, to me, it's probably going to mimic something like Style Reference, where we saw that first version and it was okay. Like, it was good. It worked. But like now we're at Style version 4, and I don't even think we knew about Style version 2, 3, and
Right.
it was just like kind of like, oh, you can go back through the style versions now. I was like, I don't even remember you releasing that, but cool. I feel like that's going to be the same way with personalization. Like each one of them got somewhat better, and I think they got way more controllable as you started to get a little bit further into it. So I'm kind of amped about the personalization. I already think it's been better, to be honest. Like from when it first started, this is just anecdotal, and I might just be crazy, but when we first got it, it was, I don't know if it's still taking into account and like building as the algorithm evolves for how it generates, but my stuff now has been way more, even more so amplified in my style. Like I could really just if I'm trying to get something that I was doing my typical Land Rover Defender prompt that I use in just about every presentation, and I was doing that the other day.
Yeah.
And I swapped in my P code, and it was like bang spot on, and I was like, that is crazy. I don't even have to do anything anymore.
Well,
so,
you know what? That's interesting too, because I wonder
Yeah.
how much of that is based on things that you've created from the prompt, right?
Yeah.
Like does that personalization come down to even keywords within the prompt, right? So like I've prompted so many portraits, and that's where I noticed the personalization stand out the most, right? But I wonder too, like, does it get down to that granular of a level to where it knows that you've done that? It's got a data set it's pulling from, and then it's basically saying, okay, here's what we would get without it. Here's what we would get, what he's created already with it. We're going to sort of lean the side of the direction with the personalization code. I am curious, based on when this first launched, I think you and I were talking about, hey, like, let's run this stylization of the personalization code pretty high. Let's see what that looks like. Have you been playing around with lower numbers now? Because I know you, just like I, are sort of like a lower stylization numbers guy, but obviously that could play a little bit differently with the personalization, because that's what it's impacting when you have personalization on.
It's crazy if you want to get real nerdy, right? Like it's always depending on me what else is going on. I like
Rory, that's what we do here. That's what we do here.
like I'm saying, man, I always like to, the stuff granted, a lot of the stuff that I produce and put out on social, I try to keep it very digestible, because it's just I don't want my crazy brain to be on expose at all times, which is either a good thing or a bad thing. But when I'm throwing in 5 different image prompts and 3 different style references, and playing around with multi prompts, throwing my p value in there, like it starts to get really hard to understand like and isolate the variable which is affecting it all, right? So even bringing it down, which I did recently, which is, all right, I'm gonna go with super simple prompts, like super simple, like break it back down to like just having like my subject and what's going on, and that's it, nothing else, and then using my p value, and then ripping up on the stylization to see what happens. I've seen, like, I don't want to say it gets too crazy, but like it starts to feel like off, and that's just me. That's just my own personal opinion on it. It doesn't feel like it does at like 100. Like 100, style default feels like me. Up to about 400, 500 feels like me, and then it starts to feel like it's Midjourney taking over like it normally does. But
I am so glad you said that, because
Yeah.
I have kind of felt that too, right? Like when we first started talking about personalization, when it rolled out, we did a LinkedIn live. We had a group session on that. We talked through the idea that, hey, run that stylization up, because let's see what your personalization actually is. And again, we don't know what updates have taken place from that first launch to what they're working on now. I do feel like it's changed.
Yeah.
But I'm totally with you, right? Like, I think there's a case that you could make of, hey, if it's a small, simpler prompt and you have a little bit of liberty creatively of what you're trying to put together, run the stylize higher on your personalization versus maybe lower on something a little bit more specific, kind of like what we did with the Midjourney specific model anyway. But I think like that way you could almost use your personalization as this big asset, when you run that stylization number high, versus I always was afraid to run that stylization number super high with the Midjourney model, just because it would start to not really look like the type of images I would want.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, because I know you use it way more than I do. Like, I feel like you're in 2 camps here. It's very bipolar. You're either a style raw person or you're not. So I know you're probably more in the style raw camp than I am. Like I tend to love, Midjourney's overemphasized like crazy style. It makes me happy. But, I don't really use it that much with Style Raw because I feel like my personalization style is on like more of the raw side. Does it have a
Ah,
big difference? Does it play a big role for you when you're using it?
the style raw on or off?
Style Raw and personalization together.
Oh, I mean, that's all I've run really. I may
Okay.
have just run a handful where it's just the standard, but I leave raw on as a default. So most of the time I don't even think about it, right? But that's probably worth exploring too, right? Like how far does that veer off and what kind of results do you get that are a little bit differently from that? I was starting to get this idea with Style Raw actually. How much does this really matter?
Yeah.
Because I felt like it used to matter a lot more.
So
And what I mean
much.
by that is I noticed like, in that day between, those times between Discord and having multiple windows open, I thought I had Style Raw on, and it turns out like for I don't know, a couple days I didn't. And I didn't really notice much of a difference. So I say all that like I don't even know if that is really a huge factor anymore. I think now when you got stuff like personalization too, which is kind of your point, it knows that I like a little bit more of this photorealism, filmy look kind of thing. So maybe it's not really as important to make sure that I have on. But that's an interesting question.
Because for me, especially when I'm creating content, right, and I'm trying to show people ask a lot of the times, like what's the difference? Like, why don't you either one? Why don't you use Style Raw? Or number two, like, what is Style Raw? And to me, one of the hardest pieces of content I ever had to create was like showing the difference between both. It's most of the time it's there's no visible difference because I ran it on like I don't know 25 tests. Maybe it was visible on like 5, and I put that. And here's a little behind the scenes, everyone. Sometimes a little bit ingenuous to show comparison sakes on like what some of the content that personally I have to produce for something like that. Like Style Raw, it's such a minute difference. It's really hard to compare and contrast and like give someone a visual representation of what that means. So, even if there was 25 tests run, only 2 of them came out. Like those are the ones that you're going to see because it has to make some sort of visual difference, right? But that's always been my thing. It worked really well with I want to say like V5 and V5.1. Like it was definitely a noticeable difference there.
Okay, so that's what I was going to
Yeah.
bring it back to because
Yeah.
you remember how that shifted, in those early V5, 5.1, 5.2s, where they each had very distinct looks. It felt like Raw made a bigger difference then. Ever since 6, I don't know that I've really seen it.
That's also like with Stylize, right? Like when Stylize back in V5, I think it was V5.1 or maybe V5.2 when like Stylize became like when you got to 400, it was like, whoa, like we're changing the entire image here. Back, I
100%.
want to say V5, it was, you dialed up Stylize and it would basically, I would be at like between 750 and 1,000 on every image. Now I'm like rarely touching that ever. I mean, some images where it's just like I want to go nuts and like let's really push the envelope here and see what kind of wild stuff is going to pump out. Yeah, go there, but
Let's
really not much anymore.
let's take a few steps back on this too, just
Yeah.
for people that because stylization, we've talked about this, but I think it still confuses people, right? Like
Totally.
it's because a lot of things are named style in Midjourney, but also like stylization has always been this weird thing to really grasp, and that's because it's sort of this idea of like I want to add style, and it sounds like you should dial that all the way up, right? But when you do that, you also give your control of the prompt away a bit, right? You're giving some of the equity and control away and deferring to Midjourney to fill in the gaps. And so it becomes, sort of this balance that you need to find for your particular style. You and I have always dialed it down. I think you might even go lower than me now, but I typically, just for context here, I'm usually somewhere between 100 and 250. I feel like somewhere in between there is like usually my sweet spot because it usually does a great job of taking into consideration everything that I've put into the prompt and then also, adding enough of that style to fit my aesthetic, right? And so what would you like to share, or what do you think is some of the hang up with stylization? Are you kind of seeing that with people that you talk to, that they don't really know how to dial that in?
Yeah, I mean, everything's just called style. I think you hit on that, right? It's just like, all right, we got Style Raw, Stylize, Style Weights, style reference, style this. It's so much style But it was. I think it might have been one of the first parameters. If I'm not incorrect on that, maybe I am. I remember that coming out and being like, oh, I can juice the hell out of this without being like, without changing my prompt a lot.
Yeah.
So that was, it was like one of those things. But it's weird. Like I live below the default a lot on this stuff now. Like 90 is a great one for me. I do like style. I like between 90 and 100 tends to produce some stuff. I also think it's like, again, going to whatever you're trying to get from an output standpoint. If you want something super sensationalized, like go all the way up. If you want something that looks way more raw and maybe even more like vintage, you want to go down to 0. Not vintage. Maybe that's the best. That's not the best.
Flat,
terminology.
like a flat.
Flatter.
Like you don't need to see every detail. It's more like what you would get out of a camera, right? Like or that film look that you and I really like, right? It's sort of like it's more about the image as a whole than it is like somebody's face and seeing every little dot and texture and pore, and I think there are places and times for both, but most of the time what we're creating is not sort of these extreme close-ups, and just depends what type of image you're going for.
Well, what's crazy is most of the time what I notice too is like when you go up to, if you want like a close-up of a face, right, and you go up to like Stylized 1000, you get some of the most symmetrical, crazy looking like model faces you've ever seen, like the most chiseled jaw lines, like women with absolutely perfect symmetrical faces and like sharp green eyes. Like where are they even getting this training data from? That's when it looks like that polish to it. It's like that like,
yes,
I call it the AI polish. It looks like a doll. Like it doesn't look
like a sheen
real anymore.
It's
like a sheen. That's where it was for a long time. That's what everyone was producing. I mean, I remember when we were like, there was like this total arc where it was AI came out, and then it was like, how do we make everything look like that? Yeah, and then everyone's like, oh, we got there, and everyone else started doing it. It's like, how do we make things look ugly?
The other way.
It was like, oh,
totally.
let's introduce weird, and then I was like, oh, that's what I'm talking about.
This is a photography thing too, and I've noticed this with like photographers, especially when they're new. You start with this idea similar to that, right? It's like, I'm going to, dial up saturation and do this and that. And it just becomes too much, right? So then you have to understand and develop this eye to know where to bring it back to. And it's similar to that, same with like presets or anything with Lightroom if you're a photographer. Just like all of that. There's like, just like with anything else, the key is moderation, right? So it's like, this is too far. And usually what you think is probably, especially when you're early, is just right. It's probably a little too far. So you just pull back just a little bit, right? And I don't know. It's just something I think we all go through as we're developing that eye, especially if you haven't been there before, because you have to sort of train and put in the reps, to really understand what looks right. It's hard to, really critique and understand and like decide on your own images as opposed to somebody else's.
I feel like it's, I feel like it's very similar. This might be a reach on a comparison, but I feel like it's very similar to how I, like listen to music, right? If I find a new genre or a new band that I like or something, right? Like, oh, okay, let me go listen to everything that they've done. And you go all the way to like the most present thing. And it's like, how do they start? You rip it back down to the bottom, like, especially with something like hip hop. Let's say you got introduced to hip hop today, start listening to hip hop. You get into it, you start like trying to find more, and then you're like, how did this all start? You get back into the, into the 90s and the late 80s, and you're like, well, this shit's hot. This pops. This is good.
Bro, so, I saw something on TikTok yesterday about Bone Thugs and Harmony took like this old school Sega game, and I can't remember the name of the game. It's some like not even a popular game, but like different screens. Like if you're going through a character's bio, there was like this beat, and they took that beat and applied it to the music, right? Like that's why 90s, cool. Early 2000s hip hop was the best, is because they're just creating this music from just these things of that were just born out of imagination, right? And it's just so much more natural and organic and relatable, I think, from that standpoint versus all this auto-tune stuff. But that's just maybe my opinion.
I'm with you on that. Unfortunately, you go down the YouTube rabbit hole every once in a while. I find myself watching like the history of turntables and things like that, and it's same thing. You just like people just find sounds. They're like, I'm gonna loop that, and then I'm gonna throw a bass line on it, and kick drum, and like bang, song. banger. It's like, all right, that's way more creative than, let's do not to hate on something like Suno or Udio or whatever the new AI tools are that can produce music. They are fun to use. I will say that. You can go in there and create anything. Most of the time I'm going in there and creating like instrumental 90s hip hop beats. Like that's what I'm looking for. So, I'm trying to utilize without having to go through stock images or stock music. But like, that it's timeless. It works for just about anything too. That type of music. So, dude, I'm glad we have the same perspective on that. But it's the same thing with these images, right? Like I feel like I went so far when I started, went so far with the stylize and was like, here's all this crazy stuff, and then I was trying to bring it back down to like stylize 0. And how do I make people look ugly and weird? I remember there was a phase like, how do I make people? This sounds so bad. How do I make people look ugly and like natural, not polished, not perfect eyebrows, not perfect lips, asymmetrical features, normal, fat even. I remember trying to prompt fat Arnold Schwarzenegger for like 2 hours. It just wouldn't happen. Like they wouldn't they wouldn't allow it. It's
How long ago was that?
Oh my God, that might have been V5, but I swear to God I spent 2 hours. Every
I know,
word you
yeah.
could think of. Every word you could think of to try and get him fat. It wouldn't work.
I've been there with actually that scenario. I haven't spent a ton of time with like overweight, fat, obese, but the ones that I have, they only go so far. Like it doesn't seem to exaggerate too much. Now, ugly, I have found the end of that road. It does get pretty ugly.
Yeah.
And actually so ugly that it becomes beautiful, right?
Awesome.
Like, and so that's where I think you're sort of alluding to as well. But I think it's super interesting. What do you think now that we're talking about too, maybe like with stylization, right? Like there's probably some myths about how to use it or some real lack of knowledge of how it worked. Are there anything else that you feel like are myths or misconceptions based on people that you talk to about Midjourney as a whole?
Oh, there's a bunch, man. Like I feel like I get this question asked a lot to me from graphic designers, especially, where they're used to just building and constructing images in multiple layers, and they're doing different pieces and different. It's basically like you're a chef in a kitchen, right? Like you basically put all of your ingredients out onto the table and then you make a meal, right? So I think about it's not a finished product. I say it a million times. Doesn't have to be this one image that incorporates everything. You can go and create all the ingredients and then put them together yourself. So, for me, I've always liked to do that, especially with my carousels and things of that nature. Icons, different little like overlays or gradients or things like that. Because if you've ever worked in Photoshop, a lot of times you're thinking in layers. I mean, that's how I was trained as a designer. You're thinking in layers, how to mask things, how to put different you're like a collage artist in digital fashion. So, if you're thinking about all the pieces of the collage that you need to pull together, a lot of times that wasn't just all provided to you. You had to go search on stock sites. You had to go find different things and like transform it into vector images on Illustrator and then move it over into Photoshop so you could make it, get rid of the pixelation. I mean, there was so much crap that we had to do. Now it's like I use it for, I need an icon. Great, done. I need like a half moon like little something to overlay so that I can create like a different frame on an image or something along those lines. Yeah, I can go do that. So I like it for its versatility. I love creating different photorealistic like crazy scenarios, but I also love it for if I'm creating a presentation and I want to do like show a flow chart and I want to create basically like a visual representation of that flow chart. This is how I can go and do it very easily. So, yeah, I think everyone's just looking at it as a push button solution, and it's not. But also, it does way more than people think it does. So
I think that's a
Yeah.
a really good one, actually. Yeah, because I mean, all you hear about is really typically just the images, but to your point, icons, illustrations, frames or wireframes rather, mood boards, which you do. Like there are different ways to utilize it outside of a single image, right? And so there are plenty of those use cases, and I don't think people are really thinking about that or talking about it enough. For me, I think it's two things that immediately stand out. One, I'm tired of hearing about the hands.
Oh
Like,
my God. Enough. We get it.
I don't really think the hands are that bad. I don't think they've been
No.
that bad for a while, to be honest. If you
What are
get a
you
six,
prompting? Like what are the prompts here that are getting the hand so bad? I want to know because I
I
haven't.
would love to know too, because
What's going on?
it hasn't been bad for a while. And even if you do get the image that you really like, and there's a 6 finger or 4 fingers, right, and it's salvageable 90% of the time in repaint. I guess now
Yeah.
what we're calling it, formerly known as Very Region, but like that's an easy fix. So I think that's one. The other one for me is, which we were talking about right before we jumped on here, is just there are so many ways to create images outside of just typing in the prompt, right? And going through a subtle variant, upscaling it, or a strong variant, upscaling it, right? There's blending, right? Which is, using an image weight, using a style reference, using a style code, using a style tuner. Like, you've got all these things. Personalization, reframe, right? So you could zoom out, you could change the aspect ratio, you could pan, you could remix, right? Like, so it's just, there are all these different ways to tackle a problem. And I think for me and you, a lot of people are still creating these things for personal projects. You and I do this stuff also for clients or for work too. And so I think that's important to mention, because when you do that, you get into a little bit more of this troubleshooting mindset of, how do I do this? Right? How do I get this there? Because you've got a very specific request or a specific thing in mind that you're trying to work toward, versus being a little bit more lenient on the creative capacity or creative output that you're just getting, right? And so I think, like, being under those constraints also pushes you to really understand the tool a little bit better and dissect those things further. And let's face it, I mean, you could blend 2 images together and get awesome results.
Yeah.
You can now more than ever use a short prompt with stylization and personalization and get great results, right? Like, so this idea that you need to have this perfect prompt isn't always the case, that you're starting from scratch on. There are just so many other ways to do it.
It sounds so annoying, but it's like fundamental understanding of the tool like really just helps you. It's really hard for me to try to explain to someone like, this is how you to get to like some of the end results that we get to, where it's like, oh, you just use, for me talking to you, I'd be like, I use a style, I use a style reference. I drop the style weight down to, 0.5 or 50. I, added an image prompt and blended this. And, basically I weighted the 2 style codes against each other, right? Like something crazy like that. That would sound like gibberish to someone who doesn't know what we're talking about. So, I could try to explain that, but again, the fundamental understanding of the tools makes it so much better and so much easier. That's just because we're nerds and we have to do it. But still, at the same time, it's just like at the end of the day, with troubleshooting becomes so much easier with the understanding the functionality and like what works. Also, going back to the hands situation, I just remembered something that I was riffing on with a client about this the other day. I have noticed. So I apologize for what are you like, the what are you prompting little interjection I had before. Shorter prompts tend to have crappier hands. That's what I've noticed. We ran a bunch of tests because I just remember this. My brain isn't functioning at full capacity today, but we ran a bunch of tests. Shorter prompts always, for whatever reason, like the hands. You get like these big fat fingers, or they have like 3 fingers. The longer the prompt goes, like the more detailed it is, the more expansive it is. For some reason, the hands end up better. I don't know what it is. It's just like maybe it's pulling from too many different. When it's a shorter prompt, it's pulling way too much in, leaving way too much on Midjourney's plate for it to kind of comprehend hands. And if the longer prompts, you're generating more tokens, you're pulling more from its like random access memory there. And maybe that's why the hands are
There
better.
you go. I think we just answered our own question, because that would make a ton of sense. I don't think you and I are doing too many short prompts.
No.
So again, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's maybe why we're not seeing the hands issues that other people are seeing, and probably more likely newer users are seeing. So
Yeah.
I think that makes a ton of sense. That's interesting. I've also noticed some interesting things with, and I know you have too, with some of these other controls at low values having a big impact, right? Like,
Yeah.
even just like putting chaos at 5, 3, 10, weird at 1, 3, 10. Like, those scales are big, but you actually don't need the scale, really. Like everything, like almost 10 and under with both of those is crazy. It's a huge difference. So I would say, like, if you haven't played with stuff like that, that is also worth exploring, because I don't like too much weirdness in my prompts, because most of the stuff that I feel like Midjourney throws in that's weird doesn't fit what I'm going for. That's just my personal opinion. But I notice if I use like a weird of like 3 and under, sometimes I get sometimes there's a huge difference there. So I just think like little stuff like that, you're not going to know that unless you've really, really gone far in this tool.
100%, man. I still remember my favorite like parameter set from when I originally cracked like how to make things look real and not polished on I think it was V 5.1 maybe.
Yeah, weren't you adding a little bit of weird just for that reason?
It was stylized 225, it was chaos 10, and it was weird 20. And those three together gave me like the good enough mixture where I remember I was prompting like New York City men in a bodega, and it was like two dudes wearing flat bill Yankee hats, like overweight, wearing puffy like North Face jackets. I'm like, we just encapsulated New York. Like there it is. That it wasn't like a supermodel walking into a bodega. It had like the real like crappy lighting. It was like I was like, this is it. This is it right here. And then I started translating that to, I was like, oh, can I do like grungy 90s like skateboard photography? And it was like bang. I was like, okay, we did it. It's like that was what I was looking for. But weird can, I think it's so underutilized, because I still don't know, honestly, after using it all this time, what the scale is between, it goes between 0 and 3,000. But
3,000?
Yeah, sometimes 3 does more than 1,500. And sometimes 1,500 does more than 3,000. But, it's so random.
I think that's also another point that could be dug into a little bit is, you would think, right, the sliding scale or a threshold, the higher you go on something, the more different it's going to be. It's not always the case. There's always been this little buffer on either side of a number, and each one's different, that it just kind of feels like, okay, there's not much of a difference there. Or I feel like there should be a bigger difference there, or there's too much of a difference there. So like we've talked about this with Stylize before. I think you could like probably on a less noticeable scale, but chaos too, right? Like running chaos at 10 versus 25, even though that's a large scale number, like big difference. Yes. Weird, right? Like there's a big difference even just with the subtle movement, but like once you get past a certain point, it's almost like diminishing returns. You're not really getting much of a difference anymore. Same with Stylize, I would probably say even too now between like 750 and up, kind of feels like you're all playing in the same ballpark. I don't know.
I feel the same way, man. Like the thing with chaos though, which is crazy. Like when you run those higher levels of chaos, you get nothing close to your prompt, but sometimes like 75 to 100, you'll get some absolute bangers that like you might take a couple gens to get there. But I always remember, like, because I was doing tests, like when I would run, I'm creating content. Let's just say I'm doing like, a breakdown on the chaos parameter or just on parameters in general. And I'm like, oh, okay, I have to show the difference between chaos 0, chaos 10, 20, 30 through 100. And I'd run these things and I'd find like chaos 70, 80. I'm getting one image out of the four grid that is crazy good. But I wouldn't even know how to prompt for that. And I'd try to run it through Describe and find it not even close. So it's just, it's like a little slot machine, just like these style reference codes. But I love me some chaos, especially when you have a really in-depth, like deep, detailed prompt. A lot of times when it's that detailed, your grid is going to look very similar. So like even lower levels of chaos, like 5, like you're saying, 5 to 10, that can help. Sometimes, you might want to push it up a little bit, 15. It's weird that we have like, all the freedom in the world, and you can also do decimal points, which I've always screwed around with, just to be like, what happens if I do 1.7?
Yeah, is there like a magic number that I type in and every time I'm gonna get a banger? Like I just want that every time, Like
Easter
I think
egg.
we've all thought, yeah, like exactly. Like, is there? I mean, I think that's something I've thought about quite a bit too. But like, yeah, I mean, decimal points, right? We've played with that with the image weight, for example. Like we've played with all that, and maybe even 2 decimal points, right? Where you're like 1.55, 1.92.
It's so random. There's no, I mean, then you end up starting to default to like even numbers in like 5 and 10, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to do 220, but I'm not going to do 221. It's like to me, it's so funny that you have all these options, but you probably don't use them all. And then I tried to actually, this is fun. I mean, this is how you can really just roast me for this one. I tried to calculate with ChatGPT the amount of, if you wanted to do every single
please.
parameter combination
Yeah.
with
How many?
with Midjourney. I mean, it was like
It's
40
into the trillions
to the,
or something.
yeah. It's impossible. But that was even before they added things like style weight and style reference. And it was like cannot compute, dude. Just give it up. So, because I was just trying to make a point that it's like legitimately unlimited. Like there is no end. You can't reach the bottom, basically.
I was thinking about that too with like the workflow of showing, how does someone treat an image, right? Like, let's just say I have something very specific in mind. Okay, like let me start. Here's the way I'm going to go about it. Now I've got my original grid. What do we do from here? I know you and I act in different ways sometimes on this, but that's where it starts to split. And there's so many, like I've tried to think about that as a flow chart or some sort of visual process to show that. You can't do that. I mean, because think about this, right? Like, let's just say I wanted to subtly vary a photo, right? Okay, now I've got 4 new options. All right, I like 2 of the options there. Now you got 2 more options. But, right, you could also subtle vary those. You could subtle strong those. You could pan those. But you could also then re-roll and get more options within that subtle vary, right? And you could do that for infinity, really, if that's what your method to get to where you're going. So like that's a strategy. Or you could say, hey, look, like this is kind of what I want. Let me do that same thing, but with very strong. And again, okay, now I got four new images. 2 of these I like. They're closer now, so let me subtle vary these. Okay, cool. I got 2 more that I like, but it's missing a finger, or this is in the background. I don't want that. Now I'm going to repaint. Boom, boom. And now I've arrived at my final image, right? But like the thing is too, that's a very quick funnel. So like how much time do you want to spend, or do you spend re-rolling or getting more options to then boil down to the option that you land on? And that fascinates me alone, because there's so many micro decisions that go into that. How do you, like, is there a certain way that you act every time? Do you treat this on a case by case basis? I'm curious, from your standpoint, like, do you have a default way that you like to handle your images?
Sometimes I would say, like, I typically try to start with just like a prompt structure in mind. Look, I'm always, depending on what it is, like if it's something that's a photo or we're going photorealistic on that side, I'm really starting with like what the shot type is in my head. Is it a close-up? Is it something like, what's the distance? Like, is it close-up? Is it far away?
I love that. Me and you are on the same page with that. Every
Yeah.
time, that's the first thing I'm thinking about.
Yeah, because that'll also determine what I'm doing as an aspect ratio. Because then I can also figure out how to construct like around it. Like, are we going 16:9, 3:2, 2:1, or are we going 4:5? Like, because then I know what to prompt. Because I know if I'm going to prompt something, right? Like, you got to think about this the same way. I think it probably gets, aspect ratio doesn't get talked about enough because it affects the image so much. But
Totally.
Yeah. If you want to do a close up of a face, but you want to do it in 3:1 aspect ratio, like you're only going to get the eyes because a face doesn't fit. It's a long and thin. It's not going to fit into a wide and thin box. But same thing if you wanted like a full body shot of a person and you say, I want it in 2:1 aspect ratio, you're typically not going to get the full body because a body is long and thin. It doesn't fit that way. Now, if you did 1:3 aspect ratio or 9:16, you're going to get the full body in the image because it can fit. So, I mean, I'm always thinking about that stuff first, and how to then, okay, what room do I have in my little canvas to then build around it? So that, like, basically the shot type and the aspect ratio will tell me what other details I can put in there, and then from there, I kind of just I'm very I preach structure. I'm pretty unstructured because I'm really just going for anything at that point.
I feel like you and me both have ADHD with this stuff.
Yeah,
I think because the other part of this, right, is you and I are probably also both running a lot of experiments at the same time. And what I mean by that is using permutations with some of the stuff. We've talked about it in the past, but for me personally, it's most of the time I'm running permutations. I would say the most on stylized number, just because there's sometimes a nice difference between a 90, like you said, or 100 to a 250, like somewhere in that range. So I usually do a couple stops within there, like 100, 150, maybe like a 225, right? Interesting stuff. So always doing that, but then you get into, like you said, maybe like a parameter like aspect ratio. Maybe you get into something like chaos. Maybe you get into something like, oh God, image weight, style weight numbers. Like, I mean, so to me, it's always about how can I get there the fastest, but also explore enough options at the same time. That's what I think it comes down to.
I think that's a good point, but also like going to the image weight. You said it. I don't want to jump off it because I think it's important. Like one of the things that is the hardest to me, right, is like when we get started, you get that. I like a blank canvas, right? Like basically, I kind of want to like build the prompt as I go. It's going to take a couple generations. I don't really re-roll too much unless I really like something and I just want to get like more and more and more of it. Because essentially, I know most of the time, whatever I prompt, if it's pretty standard, it's going to be pretty standard the next time too. So I'll just keep building upon it. But like when I'm looking for something that's hard, like let's say I get a lot of people that ask me about sports, like sports images and things like that. It's hard for Midjourney to handle because the body motion's dynamic. Like it's not typical, it's not a fashion pose, right? It's not like someone that you could probably have 1 million. If you think about the poses that people can do from like a fashion sense or like a regular photography sense, there's not many. If you think about the movement of a body, how many different sports images there could be and how different they are and how jumbled they are. Like every run step, like, think about soccer. Every position of their legs could be totally different in every image. No one looks exactly the same. Could be wide stance, could be like a short stance.
I was trying
foot, right?
I was doing something with runners the other day.
Yeah.
Runners, hard, right?
Hard.
You got all four appendages moving in unpredictable ways, to your point.
So that's when I started looking for structure, right? Like I need a structure, like I need to give it inspiration, almost like if you were going to give it like a virtual skeleton in a sense. Like this is how I want the image to look and be constructed, and I can kind of like skin it how I want it. So I'm thinking image prompt there, right? So image prompt to me is like you want the construction of something. So, also if there's like you want to create like some sort of like really dynamic shot or angle that's really hard for Midjourney to conceptualize. Utilizing something else, if you can go find an image that looks like that, or maybe it's some sort of something you've seen before in the past, that can be a really good way to do it. And then also you have to use image weight to basically balance that. Now image weight used to be way more predictable to me. It's a little bit more testy now.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh yeah, noticed it.
Ever since they moved to 3, when it was at 2, it was good. Like I know 1 is like the sliding scale between you go lower, it's less. You go higher, it's more.
But now even I feel like one is too strong.
Yeah.
In the scale of that should be a third of what it's taken into consideration.
Totally.
One
that's
is
why
too strong, right?
Confusing.
Because here's perfect example. If you get into, hey, I'm going to use this image as an image weight. But instead, I want this person to be black instead of white, or have a totally different hairstyle than what they have. But you want to keep, for this example, let's just say everything else the same. Well, 1 is too strong. 1 is too strong for that. So then it gets down to, okay, you got to go to the decimals, right? You got to get into that 0 point, anywhere between like a 3, if you're really going far away from it, to like a 0.75. You know what I mean? Like you have to go below 1 to achieve some of that stuff. And I agree. I feel like it's gotten far more sensitive since 3. And I would even say it's probably gotten more sensitive in the last couple months. I've noticed even 1, I feel like, is even stronger than it used to be.
I have a theory on this because I do like this stupid avatar of myself on every single carousel that I make. So it used to be like anywhere between 1.1 and 1.2 was like my sweet spot. Like that was where it was like, okay, this is where my face and like everything else translates and I can like roll with it. Now it's like, 0.5, 0.6 is where it translates. So like I do have a lot of testing and control against that because I do it for just about everything that I produce. So that one, that's where it's interesting too, right? Because you can also bring in just like subtle elements of things. Now where it gets hard is basically, and this is my conceptualization of it. I think this could be wrong, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. So when you do multiple image prompts, so when you bring like 2 different image prompts in together and then you try to utilize image weight, I'm pretty sure what that does is blend the image into like how it would blend, just on a regular blend, and then
take.
Because that's kind of what I've noticed, because I've run them separately. I've run 2 image prompts, as just a blend to see what would come out as. Then I've run the 2 image prompts with a text prompt, and then mess with the style or the image weight, and then you kind of end up with the same thing. So it's pretty. I think that's how it works. I'll be quite.
That's interesting. I've never. I don't play with that, but that's fascinating. That's the route if that's the case, and it would make sense, right? You're take the first 2 images together first, then you're doing it. But ideally, you're thinking the default is the other way around, right? Where it's like, I want this much of this image, this much of this image, then blend them, right? So,
can you? There's a dumb question. If anyone knows this, blast it out in the comment section. Can you not weight image prompts? Like, I mean, I guess you could probably multi-prompt, maybe, if I'm thinking about that correctly. I don't know why I've never thought to do this, but like, can I add?
I thought that's what you were referring to in the first place.
No, I'm talking like, if let's just say sometimes we're going nuts. Like I do these crazy like face art pictures where it's like someone's face with like all these different kinds of patterns and different really highly saturated, super colorized, but when I get to a point where I'm like, all right, let's push the needle, I'll put like 6 image prompts in there. I'll just put like all the ones that I like and then just hit generate. So I don't know if I can personally weight each individual image like you can in style reference.
I don't think you can, but yeah, if somebody does know, let us know in the comments. I again, like that's why I was sort of like that would make sense, but I've never done it. But that would be something that you would know. I would figure you would know just because you really nerd out on the image weight stuff. So
I love it.
That is interesting. I don't know that I would still use it even if it was an option, but it is fascinating to think about.
So even circling back to where we were going with like the the whole process, right? Like that image construction, that's where image prompting helps and image weight helps. When you want like visual aesthetic or like style transfer, that's what the style reference is for. So if you like kind of like the visual signature of the image, like the colors, sort of the composition, like that's going to translate more with style reference than image reference. Like image reference basically, or if you've never played around with image weight either, basically you assign how much value you want to take from that one image. And on the low end of the scale, it will do absolutely nothing. On the high end of the scale, it'll basically turn into that image. So if you wanted to like replicate a photo, I remember I did this for a picture that I took it was like a food picture that I took on vacation. I was like, let me just see what it'll do if I put it up at image weight 3. And it was like pretty much exactly the same thing. It just like retouched it and polished it for me. So, people that are looking for something that's really close, but maybe not exactly the same thing, that's how you do it. I just think there's so many different ways to get to the end result. A lot of times I'm using image prompting for like construction of an image, like the actual structure, and then style reference for any sort of like aesthetic that I want to transfer.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
So like, here's another question. This is why, being on this tool so much can be kind of annoying, because I'll oftentimes find images like from old presentations or old carousels that I'm like, oh, I want to use that again. Like I want to use that prompt, or I want to use that image as an image reference or a style reference. But, when you have 50,000, 60,000 things in your archive, scrolling back and trying to find that in the sea of nonsense that's there. One thing, Figma just did this, which I thought was freaking genius. They added this AI feature into their Figma boards, because you can, Figma boards are like infinite. You can go in there forever and they just go on and on and on. They have like they almost have like an image reference search tool, so it's like a reverse image search in there. So you put an image and it'll go find it in your design board for you. Midjourney, if you're listening, I would love that feature. So I could just like plug that into my archive and it would like pull up my image, so wouldn't have to remember what I prompted, when it was, like randomly over the last 3 years, because I feel like that would be super helpful going to find the old stuff. That's my rant for today. That's my only request of Midjourney. But
I feel like that would be a very easy thing to do. The other part of that too for me with the archive is almost, I almost have a different problem with it, which is not so much that as it is just being aware of the things that you've created in the past, right? Because when you when you create enough, even with like, I don't know your process too with, do you upscale every image that you like? Like
No,
I tend to now. I didn't used to be that way, but like I tend to now, just thinking, oh, I may have a use for that in the future, right? And maybe that's just like
good move.
maybe for a LinkedIn post or whatever. But like I feel like if I like it, I just take the extra time to just, you know. But that's even a problem because now it's just like I'm not even remembering images that I created 3 weeks ago that are good, and they're collecting dust. No one sees them, right? So it's like that idea of repurposing it, and so it's like almost like being just aware of the images you created versus a specific example, which is what you're talking about. Both could be, I think, solved. I know that Midjourney's talked about organization as a whole being something they would like to address. It's just further down the priority list at the moment, given their bandwidth.
There's so many things that probably people don't even care about that I would want from that. Like I swear.
Yeah.
There's so many like that in that space, in the archive space. Like I would love to just be able to select like 10 things. Like, oh, here's like 10 images, and then be able to share that. Like here's this, like put either one, like create a folder that's shareable, or two, like here's like basically like a custom portfolio link where you can just go like bing, 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 share, or some way to download multiple photos at one time where it's more so like you can just organize them into like a collage feature where it's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, auto format, download. Great. Awesome. That would be really nice. I'd really appreciate that. There's so many like little things. Like I don't think that matters to them. Maybe they'll have like, to your point, it'll be like a on this day feature, like it did in Facebook or whatever for the longest time. Like time hop.
Yeah.
You created this, and most of the time it was full of crap.
You know what? While we're on this, like, what do you think is like one little thing that you don't hear enough people talking about? That you think deserves more love, or maybe it's a tip, maybe it's a trick, maybe it's just something you've noticed along the way that you want to shine some light on. Is there anything like that stands out?
There's so many things. I feel like a lot of the older functions just don't get enough. I mean, like blend, I still feel like is awesome, and I don't feel like people use it enough. I love blend so much, and I don't show it a lot because there's really not a lot to instruct around it. It's just you put two images together, see what happens.
It is pretty fantastic, though. I mean, especially like if you're going for like something with product or texture or something like that, because you can create a whole new thing that doesn't even exist. All you're doing is smashing two images together. And, just in my process of like looking at other people's stuff, liking stuff, I mean, there are a lot of people that just do that. They just do that, right? It's not even a prompt. It's just that. And I think that's super cool too, because like, again, it's just another thing that you can do that doesn't require the typical fill in the blank box of what I'm trying to create, right? It could just be, I want to see what this would look like with this.
There's some other like random stuff I've come across. Like whenever I'm trying to do minimalism like super well, I've always tried to flip on Niji for a little bit in the photorealism space, or at least like create an image with Niji and then reference it against that. So there's always some like really weird tricks. I also like to use Niji to like kind of give my photos sometimes like an animated polish to it, where not go full animated, but sometimes go like, oh, I created something photorealistic and I'll throw it into Niji, right? And then give it like this subtle like streak of animation. It can look really cool. This is personal stuff, guys. Like I'm not doing this for work. This is like for real, like when I want to have fun and like really just blend stuff and see what you can actually do with this tool. That's where I have a lot of fun. That's when the gates open up too, when you start going down those routes. Also flipping back through old versions. I mean, I love to go back to 5.2. I love to create tuned styles, go back, create those basically like your own sref codes, and then go utilize them back as style references now. So then like I can create like my own little style reference code. Then I come back, flip back to V6, and then go and do that. So, I don't know how many people are doing that, but I miss my good ones that I had there because those things were fire. now they're lost to the archive somewhere.
Yeah.
What about you? What are you doing?
You
gotta do some weird stuff. You gotta do some weird stuff too. Come on.
No, I do. I'm just trying to think like of a few different options we could go here. I think one that not a lot of people talk about, one that not a lot of people talk about too much is probably in the curation process of putting together images, the search functionality within an image.
Uh-huh.
So there's that search icon. There's the search bar, right? But then there's a search icon when you click into an image, and that could be from your archive, or that could be from an explore page. So I just did a post on LinkedIn, putting together some fashion images. I wanted to get different angles that I thought looked cool, or feature different subjects in an interesting way. I utilize things like, that search functionality, the bar, find some image that I like. Maybe that's from like a angle perspective, or just the way things are laid out, a composition. And then I'll click into that, and then I'll click into the search icon button. Now, what that does is that gives you a different feed of similar images to that one. And that's an incredibly powerful way to put together images, especially when you're trying to tell a story, because then you can, like, you're not just going through maybe your process of, hey, these are all the camera angles I know, right? And, this is that and this is that. You're really then almost like shortcutting the system of, hey, Midjourney does do this. And rather than me taking 5 hours to figure out how it does this, I can do that, apply it to this particular project, and make this a piece of my story, right? Whether I'm changing out the subject, the lighting, the colors, whatever it is, building on top of it, doesn't matter. But like, there's that portion of it. And then you could do that with your own images, right? So you can click in your own image, any image that you have in your archive, click on that search, and then you can see all those similar images. And that was sort of like a thing that kind of disappeared for a while, that, if you remember that, like, in the early days of Midjourney, that it used to just give that to you pretty obviously, I would say. And you're just like, oh, these are cool. This is a cool way to sort of think about that same image or the same subject, for example. Well, that in particular, I would say, is like one of the bigger things I don't think a lot of people talk about, don't know about, don't utilize. And the quality of the results when you do that versus just going to a search bar, you get like 3x better results. They're higher quality results. And I'm not sure what goes into that. It could be community rankings, likes, for example. I have no idea, but the results are better.
You showed me that, and I was like, what? This exists? I had no clue. No clue that exists.
Man, I use that a lot. I use it a ton because, yes, you can know all of the angles in the world. You can know all the different things as a photographer or a film director or whatever you are. But like, still, you have to operate in the confines of Midjourney. And so when you really view and curate other people's stuff and understand what worked, what didn't, right? Then I think you understand the system a little bit better too. You know how to sort of manipulate that prompt or what you're going for within the confines of Midjourney, which is going to save you time, right? So yeah, that's the one I got right now. I'll think on that some more. Maybe we'll do that for the next episode, but that's what I got.
It's a good one though. I mean, realistically, there's also, it's rooms is a big unlock for me. You can go in there and learn, but also I like to organize myself. I build myself private rooms. So if you miss the channels in Discord, you can build your own private room and just generate what you want in there as if you would like a channel on Discord. I do it for style reference codes, so I can keep that organized at least, so I can go and scroll through there quickly instead of through the entire, mishmash. That's my archive and just that wasteland of stuff that's in there. So, I mean, that's another one. I just think there's so many little intricacies. I was doing this the other day too. I forget where the hell I was. Somewhere where I was waiting in line, and I was like, let me rip open Midjourney real quick. Go with a little bit of just off the cuff prompting. See what happens. I don't want to prompt too much, but I went and I started doing like song lyrics that were in my head, and I actually got some really crazy stuff. Now, again, it depends on the song lyrics. I used to see a lot of that on social, on Twitter, things like that. But I threw in there, I think it was from Red Hot Chili Peppers, like psychic spies from China try to steal your mind's elation, and I was getting the most wild stuff I'd ever seen. I was dialing up the weird value too, just to see where that would go. And it's funny because you put so much effort into prompting all these crazy things, right? Like, oh, you make sure all my shot angles are correct and all my my color grading is right, and then out of nowhere, I throw in psychic spies from China, and bang, I start getting absolute piss missiles of of images that are out of this world. I don't even know where to share them because they're so weird, but they're so cool at the same time. And things like that, you just go in and gotta have fun with it.